Welcome to today's webinar, which is Experience the All New RISA-3D. My name is Debbie Penko, and I'll be showing you through a new and improved RISA-3D. We've got a lot to show off. We've done a really big facelift and lots of cool features I'm going to show you here in the next hour. So let me jump right into the program. So let me kind of see here, I have a model already open. And when we look at RISA-3D, we can notice that it's very similar layout to what it used to look like. The data entry toolbar, which used to float around, is now docked on the side. But otherwise, we have a row of icons on the top, kind of very similar setup where we see the icons are now ribbon format. That's a big difference, really. Is that instead of a drop-down older style Windows-based thing, we have actually a ribbon. And the ribbon you can see really a lot of things on your ribbon are your main tools that you've been using. Your home tab is up on the top. And just to give a little tour of what things are, we've always have global settings, we used to call this, but model settings is really the what we're talking about. All of that is listed right here on the left in the home tab. And you've got information on there, you've got units, all of those major things that you've been used right off the bat when you're in a model. Then if you want to draw members or plates or anything like that, drawing elements, drawing loads, basic load cases, kind of your very most popular things you're doing all the time, that would be in your home tab. Your quick view tab has always been here. We've got lots of, these are kind of what I always called quick buttons. They're always here on the upper right corner. And then a lot of the tools you have here are going to be in the different ribbons that you might be interested in doing. So we'll kind of go along the way into the different pieces. But it's still the similar type program where there's a model view and I can spin that model around and see the different elements on that. Quick views to get to that model view. We've got the XY, the XZ, the YZ right there on the screen. I always go right back to isometric. But when you're seeing here, I'm moving the model a little bit more dynamic here. It makes it easier for me to see that in the 3 dimensions. I'm going to just show this in a rendered view really fast so we can see what that looks like. When I zoom into this rendered view, you can see it's a lot more realistic, which just makes it a little easier to understand your model. We're looking at, as I hover over that model here, the member selects, which is a little different than in the older system. And the selection used to be like a double-click dialog, and you opened up a dialog and it had all the information on that member. I love the double-click dialog in the older version. And what is replaced in this version is a properties grid. So it allows me to grab the member quickly without double-clicking on it, and I can make changes to that right on the fly. It's a little bit more live, the change, which I think is more important. Instead of having to make a change and then saying, okay, committing to it and looking at it, you can make a change right on the screen, and it's going to happen right there while you're doing it. So you can make changes to a lot of things along the way. It should make your workflow faster in doing those changes like that. Let me pop in here. I'm going to just quickly see what this looks like. So for example, this is a W18 by 40. And that's being assigned from our shape database. And you can just gain access directly into the shape database right here from this screen. So you can see whether you want to change that. Say you wanted to change this into a let's say a 14 instead. And you'll see that that filters our shape database. So you can see the different shapes that are available on this database. So for example, you could take up like a W14 by 53, and that could be your new member there. You can view the properties of this member right on the screen. You can print right now from here, which is nice to be able to print out the properties of that. Otherwise, you can, let's say you wanted to make a specialty properties. You can copy this W14 by 53, and by copying it, it will copy all the properties of that, say okay, and it will then recreate one right there for you. So having that 14 by 53, you can then edit its properties, and we can rename it, let's call it special. So I'll call it that. And I can change its properties. Let's say it's actually truly a 14-inch, and maybe change its width here to an 8-inch. And I can say, hey, I actually just want to leave these properties, but this is the design properties for the geometric. Or I can recalculate it. By recalculating it, it will change its moment of inertia based on these properties. So you have a few more functionality than you would have in the past in this database. So if I want to recalculate it, it does. And then I can say, okay, or print or clear it, go from there. So now I've made changes. It's asking me if I want to make these permanent to my database. I'm just going to say no, but you can go ahead and edit that or delete that or copy it again as you need. So a lot more tools inside of our database. I'm going to choose that one there. We'll use our specialty member that we just created. And now that's what I'm using for this member. So it's kind of a cool way to go through all the different elements. You can make changes to things on the fly. You can adjust things, select things along the way. So what I'm going to do is still have these unselect tools on the side. I'm going to unselect everything. And I'm going to just take a look at here are some of my spreadsheets. Spreadsheets are really very popular. I've always found spreadsheets to be a great way to manipulate the model. Even as the graphical interface gets better and better, the spreadsheets are always important to be able to get into. And so some of the tools we've added, we had a lot of tools inside of the spreadsheets. Some of them were just probably hidden. And I think that having this format being up front and center is easier to see. For example, we've always been able to adjust the font, but it's nice to have it right here on the screen. So you can increase or decrease the font as you go. You can reset the widths of these columns so that they're nice and set. You can always, select the entire model, the entire spreadsheet, for example, or you can select just something in here. It's up to you. We've also always had this tool that helps you graphically select and unselect, but some folks haven't seen that because it was a little hidden in the older versions. So I like to show that here. If you want to select maybe some of these columns on your screen, you can just select them by highlighting them and then say select. And on the screen, you'll see in the background, it's showing up that those are now selected in blue. So you can either select them like that. You could also just go ahead and lock the whole model. And I'm going to lock it actually. There we go. And I lock that and I see that on my screen, those are the ones I just selected. And if I even wanted to make changes at this time, I could make a change to them. For example, change their shape altogether or change their material, whatever properties I want to go ahead and adjust. So any of you have a general property, any of the node properties or the design properties, all of those things can be adjusted right there. The lock tool is something that I use commonly in this version. I also use it in the older version, but I think that in the new version here, it just helps us to find things in the model based on that selection. I'm going to go back to wireframe really fast here so we can see. So you can see those are now selected. When we go back into our members spreadsheet, you always have other tools here. That's just the tool on the ribbon here gives us ways to insert rows, copy things, fill block, all of the things that we've kind of always seen along there, maybe with a right-click dialog or with another spreadsheet dialog here. But the ribbon toolbar helps us select these things. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. But before I do, I want to show you guys how this docks. So you could, if you wanted to look at both the model view and this at the same time, I can dock this window below, and then it will then be on a lower level. And then we have the 3D view still in present view. So it's just docked. And sometimes in the other systems, in the older version, you might have a window set up like this. I found mine to be a little bit unruly. I never knew where that window was going to go. This one is a little bit different, and I like it a little because it will help us navigate things differently. So for example, if I want this member spreadsheet to dock behind there so that it's a tab, I can just stick it inside of that circle, and all of a sudden that member data is right there, and the 3D view is now here. So I have a few different ways to view things all at the same time. So I can see, okay, I actually wanted to adjust this in a spreadsheet, but full panel, I like that it's there. I can go into 3D view and it's right there too. So I'm going to, we can close that down there. We can see from there. Another cool thing about modifying things on a mass basis is that you can grow a lot of things. So you can make changes to a lot of members. You can make changes to nodes. So what I can do is I'm going to show you that here. If I maybe select everything on that top row, but I say, whoops, I forgot some of these. Your mouse, what you'll notice I'm using my mouse to use my selection. And if you use my control key, the plus sign comes up. If I use my minus key, my shift key, the minus key comes up. So when you use your control key, you're going to see I can pick up more members. If I then push the control, I would remove those members. So I'm going to select all of these members. And I'm also selecting a lot of things. At the bottom of the screen, it shows me I am selecting 296 nodes. I selected 270 hot rolled steel members. I'm going to go ahead and shift this to just the nodes is what I want to select. And then I have all the properties of those nodes. The nodes that I'm going to change here, I have currently at a 48 foot elevation, I'm going to adjust that to say 50. And by doing that, all of a sudden, the entire model grows up to 50 feet. So that just helps you make a change. You can unselect everything. You can look at the model again. Makes you modifications really easy using selection tool. The other thing you could do is you can actually just delete using your delete key, which is kind of a normal thing for most programs, right? But it's one of those things where you have to push the delete button and go ahead and go from there. Using your keyboard, it's just so easy to just delete a member or delete a node, for example, if you wanted to delete just that node. So doing all that is easy. The other cool thing is just in case you didn't want to delete, you can undo. So just you have an undo tool that we've always had. What we've added to it is these list of information that we did. So I just deleted a lot of things and I can undo those things. I made some changes to the model. I can undo that. So all of that can be done all by just pointing to that selection. You don't have to keep clicking, and it'll give you some information about what you did for the last few steps that you were working on. So next thing I want to do here is I want to just run the model and take a look at some of the things that happen along the way. So I can open up load combinations and run the model from in here. Otherwise, I can go, and so I'm just going to say, maybe I'll put P delta. Actually, I'm going to leave P delta off here, but I'm just going to say solve the current load combination. And we'll run through the solution, and it's going to solve and find all of the members' results and go through and optimize all of those results for me, just like it would have always. We'll see the data entry toolbar will be up here. We'll then also get a results toolbar, which give us all the spreadsheets of the results on the bottom here. So I'm going to get that. It tells me I did not run P delta. That's fine. One of the things here we're going to find I have an instability, and it's asking me if I want to view that. And I'm going to say yes, it's changed a little bit, and I think we want to look at that. The other thing here, it gives me a warning log. So I have one member that I defined as a beam instead of a column, and I can one of the cool parts now is I can export this. So if I have a long list of warning logs, I can send that out for a text file and I can review it later. That's kind of helpful. Or I could print this if I needed to. I'm just going to say close. Now this is my locked view. The locked view I have now shows up with a really red node. So it's telling me that N158 is unstable. And this is kind of a common thing. I'm going to stick this right in my main screen here. Let's pull that out there. So this locked node is going to be, actually I'm going to stick it into this one right here. Shut this down and I'll put this one right into the middle so we can see it. So we've got, this is our locked view. And now we can see a little bit more information on what's happening there. And so N158, we might want to review what's going on in N158. So this is common. You go into your node reactions and you scroll down and you find in your node reactions what is going on in node 158, and that's my MY, which is locking. So to look at that, I put my hand in the right hand rule direction, and I go ahead and I spin my fingers around in the Y, and I see that probably N158, that lock doesn't mean anything. What is really happening is it's just spinning about its own axis, and that can happen sometimes in a three-dimensional modeling system. So there's a 0 running through the stiffness matrix, and so it's not real. And to fix that, I'm just going to go ahead and make some changes here. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to get rid of those, clear those results, and we're going to go ahead and say, okay, we're just go right to this locked nodes. Instead of the locked nodes here, I'm going to go ahead and just find that member, and I think that was over here, N158. And I'm just going to say, hey, that node, that one right there is selected, N64. I'm going to use my plus, my control key to get more nodes, maybe a few others here, because I think these probably are all going to have similar problems if we start to work on it. So I'm going to go ahead and give a reaction in the Y rotation, and then we'll solve the model one more time, and we'll see what happens, make sure that we've got a lock, that lock goes away, and we're going to be getting a full results on that. So it'll help us to get this design based on that. And we should, before we go any farther in that design, we always want to double check that that reaction I just added, nothing is coming out of it. If we see any actual reaction in that, then we know it's not really a false reaction that we just placed there, that there is something that is spinning and it truly needs to be addressed. So now looking at this node reactions here, if I scroll down here, I can see everything looks to be okay in that MY. Those are not the new ones here I caused. There's another there, so I'm okay on that. So we've got all set on those. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take a look at some results. So we have always had code check like that. We can see what we've got now is just a little different naming for it convention, but we can look through and understand what the code checks are for these members. We could always do things like if we look at the global here, if we're looking at quick view, I like to look at things color coded. So unity check, it's organized here just like we've always had. We have a lot of information that you can color code. You might notice there's just a line in the middle, and that just shows me this is all for the results versus this is for input. So if I go to unity check on my screen, I can see all of that. I can see I have a deflection right there. I can show with undeflected shadow. It just helps everything is really up front and center for us to look at while we're looking at the model. I also have a new and improved detail report, and I want to show you guys that because that is one of the things that is really valuable. The detail report is always when I'm clicking on a member and I want to understand more about this member. A detail report really goes into a full calculation of it. And we've always had a great detail report. It gives you a full description, but I think that the input and the data properties, all of the things that we have inside of that member have been spelled out a little bit more to give us more information. And so this is helpful. Material properties you can see right on the screen. And you can see we've always had diagrams, and the diagrams are easily expandable so you can understand what is the maximum and what's happening along the member. I think this is really helpful to understand all the different deflections or axial forces or whatever you're trying to look through. We've got diagrams for that. But what has been fully expanded beyond that is that the calculations are now given to you in a full description of what's happening. So when you're looking at this model and you understand that it's 82% stressed in the unity check, what you can understand beyond that is more about why. So the flexural analysis shows us in the strong axis a full breakdown of what the calculations are for the lateral torsional buckling factor. And it gives us our CB calc here, our slenderness ratio. It explains everything about what went into this calculation, the yielding, and then it goes beyond that into what is the final calculation for why this came up with what is the allowable and what we found should be for what is happening in the actual. So you've got all of that listed for every single type of calculation we're doing inside of RISA. It's really helpful to understand all of those calculations. So if it's the shear calculation for any of the different axes, you've got all of that listed right there, and you can find that for that calculation. And then that last piece, which is your bending and axial interaction calculation, So you've got that all in one place, and it's really, really helpful to you can print it from here. You have some options about whether you want to print it as expanded or summary. You can go ahead and put it on your full report. And I'm going to show you a little bit more about printing right now too. So then once we kind of think about what we can do for a report, that's the next piece I would talk about here is that you have the ability to print either the graphics or the report. So I'm going to start with the report. And in here, we can see that we have a full expansion of either the input or the results, and it's broken down into you can put in all of the input. And if you did all of the input, we are currently seeing 156 pages. But I could break that down and say, actually, I don't want all of the input. That's a lot to look at. I can say, I really just want to maybe not the project grids, maybe not the nodes, but I do want to know about the boundary conditions. That's important to me. For the elements, for example, I have a lot of different things I can bring across in those elements. And maybe I don't want everything, but I am interested in just the hot rolled steel materials and maybe just my hot rolled section sets. And by doing that, now I've trimmed my whole print preview to 62 pages. So print preview is something we could never have done in the past. It was really, really difficult for us to get this in the program. But now it's really, a really detailed way to understand what's happening, and just you can flip through all of your pages to find out what's going on in that model. So you can do this for a lot of different things, bringing across, just the important information. I got it down to 3 pages, which is helpful. And now I want to look at things like the results. And then for the results, I want to know maybe specifics about just the node reactions. And that's the most important thing to me. And you can see how you can drill that all the way down to what's important in those reactions in there. You have ways to filter. So the same filtering here, we can find filtering inside of the program. We can do filtering for the results. And I can show you that here. Upcoming model, we'll look at how we can use this filter a little bit. You can also do a batch on the detail reports. So we have all the detail reports can be either added all at once to the model, or you can add select ones. So you can either select all or just ones that you're interested in. The other thing you can decide is what you want to show in those detail reports. Did you want to show an expanded, or did you want to show it as a summary? And once you decide that, you can see it all the way through here. You can even reorganize these. So if you decide actually you wanted those detail reports up front and center, you can put them right at the top of the screen and maybe put them really in the very beginning. It's up to you on how you get those to sort in there for you. And you'll get that to the top of the list. So you can manipulate this model in different ways just by arranging it right on the screen. The other cool thing is that you can always bring in different things, like you can bring in images, you can bring in miscellaneous items that you want to import from other programs like a PDF. We have import items here. The other one, the item option, you can also do is tell the program specifics about what you're printing. Are you printing member sections or endpoints? The other piece is you can omit blank spreadsheets. So that means if you have a fully blank spreadsheet and you click this on, it will then not print those for you and it will just omit them from the list, which is really helpful. So all of those things here, you can go ahead and then print, either do a PDF or you can print to an actual printer. You can build out those. And like always, you can then save this report as a new template, or you can find from existing templates that you have there. You can import existing templates. So let me go ahead. The other way we might want to print, so I'm going to kind of look through the printing a little bit more. Printing is really important on the screen. And so one of the things that I've always liked to be able to is try to find like a level. If I want to try to print a specific level, I could say, I'm interested in printing, for example, just this top level. So to do that, I can highlight that top level and I'm just going to lock out the bottom. So using that lock tool, I can just say, okay, I'm interested in just this upper level and I'm going to look at in the XY, let's see, the XZ direction is important to me. I can print this and go to, say, print graphics. But one of the pieces I've always struggled with in RISA is like printing. I always try to get it just the right orientation on the screen, and then I print to paper. But here, now I'm doing it, I can actually do it live right on the screen. So I can say, okay, let me adjust this, and I actually want to show different information. Like I forgot to put the labels on. I can put the labels on, but then I go, oh, it's a little bit, I can maybe say, let's change the text size a little bit. There we go. So I'm doing a live alteration on that text size as I'm looking on the screen, which is really, really helpful for printing out a large model like this. I can also say, actually, the symbols are a little bit small, big, I can adjust that. Maybe you can zoom in, zoom out. You can make changes to additional comments. Anything you want to do inside of that print, you can set it up exactly as you want on the screen. And then you can push the print button. So a lot of trees are being saved by working on that. You can even go ahead and unselect everything and bring the whole model. You can look at it and do it. Any of the views you have that you can have up here, you'll see the quick views. You can even go into a full modification if the quick views aren't good enough. So let me show you that for a second. If you're looking at your model and you're saying these are all these quick views, but there's some nuance that you're interested in that just can't get it to work. So you want to try to make it happen, and you looking at that model, it's not going to get exactly the way you want it to. You can go ahead and make that change in what is the view setup. And this would be what we had in the prior. We have view settings, and these view settings are broken out either by model settings or result settings. We also have animation right up here. So if you wanted to try to animate maybe the deflected shape, you can do that. But if you go up to your model settings, you can see you can change all of the input settings right here. So if you wanted to view things a little bit more, like turn off your nodes, things like that, you can do that right in there. You can turn on different view settings for your results. And this helps you to just set up either deflected shapes or envelope versus single load combinations. All of these things can be adjusted in these view settings. Just organize a little bit different, but otherwise, a lot of times in things like the XY view, you already have it over here, but you can do it up in here. You can turn on your project grid or turn it off. Things that you want to adjust from there are all up here. If you wanted to open up new three-dimensional views so that you can look at it all side by side, you can do it like that. We tabbed it right now, but I also could do a side-by-side view and I'm just dragging that into another viewport like this. And now I have two views. each view is working independently. So I can maybe render one. On the other side, if I go over to render, I can say, let's render this side, and this side will be rendered while this side is not. It allows you to adjust all of that in the same frame. Okay, next thing I'm going to do, let's go ahead and open up a new model. So I'm going to open up this warehouse model, and we'll take a look at other things we can do inside the program. So loading up that, one of the first things, I don't know if you noticed on that way, I went to File, and when I had opened that, it actually had a recent project preview. So I work a lot in models, and I see a lot of models all the time, all day long. So this file preview is kind of helpful for me to remember what that model looked like. And you'll see just a little glimpse of what that model is as you're working in it. So this model here, what I can do in here is just kind of look a little bit around and see what it looks like. I'm going to show you kind of similar things in here. So if we look at this model, I'm going to just turn on the loads for a second. And we'll go ahead and just see, one of the things that you'll notice here is that as I scroll about here, this is a distributed load I'm looking at. One of the differences in this modeling is that I actually have the ability to select a node, and a load, and I'm selecting this load right on the screen, and it shows up on the left side of the screen, and I actually can adjust that load on the fly, which helps me to adjust this. If I wanted to say this is 0.7 instead of 0.62, I can do that right on my screen, and I'm doing that, and all of a sudden now this load has been changed. You can change a lot of loads all at once, or you can change just one load. It's up to you how you make that work. But you can see all that is kind of really, really helpful way to understand what's going on in a model. So let me go ahead and show this a little different. I'm going to use some of my selection tools here. So I'm going to jump over to select by property. So a way you can also, now that you can select loads, we always can select members. If you've never worked with this tool before, we've had this in the past, but you can select different members, you can select plates, nodes, and it allows you to do a couple new things in there. The difference in this version is that you can override a lock, you can overwrite your previous selection. There's a lot of ways to do some additional ways in selections, which is helpful. But in the bigger piece that we have is that we added loads for selection. So by doing that, that means I can select from a basic load case. For example, let's do the ones with the WLX the wind in the X direction, positive. And then I'm going to say pick out all of the distributed loads. And then I'm going to say, by doing that, I'm going to pick out also the elements that are attached to that. So if these are distributed loads, that means I'm connecting to members, and I'm going to select the loads and the members. And by doing that, I select all of that and say okay and close. And I see that now it picked out just the members that have this distributed load on it. And that is really, really helpful if I want to start to work on just these information here, this members and those loads. So I then use my lock key, and I can then see I'm looking at just this information. So on this side, let's say I wanted to make an adjustment, and I have right now a variety of different types of loads in here. I have 0.8, I have 0.44, all of that. So what if I just select all of that, and then I say I want to make a change to all those distributed loads, and I'm going to make them all be let's say 0.05, and then we'll also say in here 0.05. And then all of a sudden, all of those loads are now uniform and distributed in the same way. So it helps to make an adjustment like that. But you can also say, actually, I don't want to do that. I just want to do one of these. So I'm just going to go to one side, and I want to make this adjustment here. This is 0.2. So I want to make just for that one. I can make an adjustment to that. So the rest of the model's still there. I didn't really adjust anything there. It's just that the lock helps me bring it back, forward, and back. So those lock tools helps to work with that right on the screen and helps you show that piece right there. So you can always go right into your spreadsheets. You've always had the ability to, but have that adjustment right where I just did it. So I made changes to the 17 different loads, and I was doing that in a spreadsheet format. But I think that this is helpful for me because I may not know exactly where that is, this member, but it's helpful when I see it on the screen. So loading adjustment by seeing it directly is really, really helpful. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and run a load combination and take a look what's going on in this model here. So let's go and we'll run just the dead and the live load and see what's happening. So when I solve the model, it's going to give us some results. And what we're interested in understanding a little bit more is kind of the results of this model. So I'll show the first thing here once we get a solution is I'm going to go ahead and look at the deflected shape. That's always where I go to. So I look at that deflected shape and I show how how that goes. So I see, whoa, that's way too much deflection. Something's going wrong. And this is kind of typical when folks end up modeling your braces in, because those braces, we don't have all of that. Our braces are going to be, we have a lot of self-weight on that brace, and maybe that brace is not tensioned like it should, and we're just really trying to use that brace as a stabilizer. So what we can do is we can find all of those members that are the braces. So just going to home, back to the select by property, and we can find some members. So I'm going to clear all of my selections, and I'm actually going to go ahead and unselect everything before we keep going. And so select by property is up here. It's also over here. So you can see that you can click on that, the same spot. And I'm going to go over to members. And this time I'm going to pick up my member type that is in a H brace. And so I think the H brace is the ones that are going to be the ones we want to select. And so once I select all of those H braces, I close that out. I then now look at this model and I have on the left side, I can make a mass change to all of them. Looks like I have a variety of different members. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure to change all of them to be a certain section set. So I'm going to see if I have a section set that I want. I have one defined called 1 inch diameter, and I'll make all of that to be the 1 inch diameter. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make a change to my material. So this is the section set here. We're going to look at it. When we go over to the section sets, you can either go into a spreadsheet or you can go into directly here. You can look at that section set and say, okay, this is A36. And you have a spreadsheet ability there, but you also could just launch right from the left side. So from this properties grid, I can open up that section set data. And from here, I can see what materials it's being used. So when I looked at it both ways, what I think I noticed is that it's kind of overwhelming sometimes if you have a large amount of data to look at that spreadsheet. But when you come from the left side, it takes you directly to the place that you're interested in. So when I want to make a change to this material, I'm going to add a material that looks similar to this, but I'm going to drop its density down to 0. And then I can see that, and we call it this one. We'll call bar special. And I have all that listed right there. And now I can say, okay, I've got all of this in there ready to go. Okay. And it commits that change, and I have it now bar special material. So it's a quicker way sometimes to make that change in a spreadsheet, and then sometimes it's just easy to make a change in one spot. And I like that I make that change, for all of those. If you'll note that I would made that change for all the H braces that were selected at that one time. So I'm going to go ahead and say, okay, now let's solve this one same load combination and see how it goes. We're going to be looking to see that deflected shape is now not really utilizing all of the self-weight of those braces. Now it's really just trying to be a brace. It's really acting like a brace just to help stabilize the system. Maybe what sheathing would be, all the different things we would be trying to account for that. So what we might do there, let me see, I'm going to turn off loads for a second. We want to go back to our deflected shape, and it looks a lot better, a lot more like what we're anticipating. So we've kind of gone down that path and said, okay, that's exactly what we were thinking on that. One of the other things I want to show you, just in case you had a question about, hey, where is a certain member, and where I'm really interested in a one member that is of concern to us. So if we look through this code check and we understand, okay, what's happening in there, you might say, okay, I really care about M74. That's a member that is of interest to me. And I showed you a way to get to that through using the select. But later on, what if you're saying, oh, it's a large model, I got lost, I need to see what's going on in this model, and M74, where is it? So we have this quick find tool. And the quick find tool is a way to get you to a complex model and navigate quickly. So you can go M74 and you can say, I want to quick find this and I want to auto zoom to that model, that selection there. And we're going to select it so it turns blue. So I can say, okay, and it goes and finds M74 for us on our screen. Zoom right there. So we're in M74. So you can select, you see it's selected there, it gives us all that information. We could either make a change or we could just say, well, where were we in the model? Ah, gotcha. It was all over there. So that's where M74 was. And that was what we were thinking about with making a change or looking at that element. So that quick find helps you get to places fast in the model. Okay, next thing I want to do is open up another model. So let me go ahead and open up another model I have. And this one is called Water Tower. There we go. So it's just this kind of a tower that I have built, something simple, but it helps us to understand a little bit of different things in it. So I'm going to kind of think through this one here. This is a tower, and a lot of times towers have a lot going on. You have a lot of wind, different directions. You've got loading coming in from, maybe icing and a lot of different configurations on that wind. And so this gives us an example of how that works. So when we look at this model, I see, wind with no ice, with all the different degrees of how it's coming in, then wind with ice and service and all sorts of stuff. So there's a lot of ways to look at that. And I like to look through how you can toggle this load, and you can toggle between the different load combinations. And we've always had this little toggling in RISA-3D. Well, one of the pieces we'll note is that we can also look at the results in this way. And so I'm going to show you how that kind of applies as we go down a long list of load combinations. Load combinations in RISA-3D can get long. So in any structural analysis tool, you have a lot to consider. And so in this case, I have 25. So what the things we've added in this version of RISA is that we have multi-threaded solution, which means that we are utilizing all of the cores of our computer. And in this computer I'm using, I think it's probably a smaller one, but you can either choose multiple or maximum. And now, once you go to maximum, what it's telling you is that you really can't do anything else in your model while you're running that program. It's going to be, when you run the solution, it's going to utilize all of your cores, which means like sometimes I couldn't even write an email. So it just gives me a little warning. Hey, do you sure you want to do that? And I'm going to say, okay, in this case, because I just want to show you guys how that works. But in most cases, you're going to want to stick with the multiple, which leaves 1 or 2 cores for you for while you're running it. You can, go write an email or look at a Word document or something that isn't going to be utilizing all your cores. So I'm going to go ahead and say, okay. And now when we run the solution, I'm going to run a batch and an envelope. And again, this is utilizing all those 25 load combinations are going to see here. So when we solve it, it's going to say, it's going to run and show us all those different load combinations. It sets them up to begin. And then it's going to break it out and show me I have 4 cores. It was really fast, but those 4 cores ran all 25 load combinations really fast for us. You may on your desktops even have way more than 4 cores. That's pretty common. My computer's a little bit smaller, but it'll help us to run a lot of load combinations all at once. And by doing that, you can also see not only do we have those load combinations to display here on the screen for the input side, but we can also look at the output side. So I can look at per load combination right here. I can say, let's go through and see which is the ones that are the ones causing us some issues. So we can toggle through right on the screen. And I think this is really helpful to see that. You could also turn your loads on at the same time. So if you want to turn those loads on, you can see like loads, or you can just go switch over to the load combination for the actual deflected shape. So that all piece there can be, or you can show results. So for whatever you decide, you have the ability to look through even envelope right there on the screen. If you want to look at the results, this is the code check right now showing us which is the worst case. So all those different pieces can be controlled right on that. And I think that's really helpful to jump between. So either way, what you decide to work on, you're looking at it right from this here. Another thing you might be concerned about in RISA-3D is that you have your code check, and we saw that in the screen as an envelope. It gives us all that information and shows us what is the worst case and what is your unity check. But what I also always look at is kind of beyond that is what our suggested design is based on. And in a tower like this, you might have some interesting results on what your suggested design is. You may not even have the ability to do, but maybe you want to say this is from a tower you're building from scratch, and you want to get a suggested design. Well, we have some members here that we're suggesting that maybe don't make sense for what you would be doing. And one of the cool things is we added into the program is the actual design lists for that. Those redesign lists are based out right inside of the program. So our suggested design is based on how that design list is listed. So when you look at that member, let's look at what that member shows here. In this member, we're using a section set, and this is the antenna portion of this. And that section set is using a design list of pipe. But that pipe may not be a good design list for you. You want to probably alter it to be what you could use in design. So to do that, you can go into our advanced tab in our redesign lists right here, and you can drill down to find what's going on inside of that database. So you pick out your actual database, AISC. You would go and find for a column, and for columns, we have pipes, and that design list would be called a pipe. And then you could go ahead and tailor this. Right now, this is just showing pipes, but maybe you want to use HSSs, or you want to use some custom pipes that you have in there. So all of that, this can be added and remove these members, so you can actually alter this to exact pipe database or pipe design list to be what you need it to be right inside the program. Before this, you would have had to do this in a text file outside the program, but having it graphical on your screen, and then you can create a new one if you want. By creating a new one, you can make different things. You can copy one. I would actually suggest copying, since a lot of times you might say, well, I know I want to kind of follow the boundaries of what I have here, but I want to really just like hack it apart. And you can just say, let's just copy this one. And then I can clear the results, and I can go ahead and make this pipe copy. And I can go ahead and say, well, actually, I don't want like any of these. I'm going to remove those, and maybe I don't want any of these, and remove those, and really go to, change it, make it your own. And this pipe copy, or whether name I have put on that, can be pulled up on that section set. And like I showed you earlier, you can adjust this section set to use a different type of design list and find from right there. So you have the ability to make all sorts of changes like that right inside the program, which is really, really helpful instead of having to leave the program. Okay, next thing I want to do is show you a little bit about how to build a model from scratch. So I'm going to go ahead and start a new model. So let's go into a file here and just say File New, and we'll go start a new model. Okay, so when we start a new model, this would be a lot, your typical workflow. You're just starting from scratch. Like I mentioned, you probably want to just make sure you have the right units. I'm working in standard imperial, but you also want to make sure you have the right settings set up. In the settings here, this is what I used to call global model settings, and now we're just calling it model settings. Really, this pertains directly to this model. So we look at the solution, the axis that we're always modeling in. So I typically go Y vertical, but this is where you would adjust that. Your codes are important, and they're listed here. Your concrete, all of that is listed right inside of here. Another piece that not everybody gets into, but it is important under file application settings. If you want to make any changes to how the application works, that's where that is. So it's going to be the input, the output, things like, did you want to always enforce P delta? And I typically don't enforce P delta from the very beginning, so I have that checked off. My file locations are all listed in here. So a lot of things I do, a lot of people like to work in a black background, and that's where you would set that up. So all of those things are set up right inside of your file application settings. So you've got that right there. Let me go ahead and show you. So if we start out in this model, what I mentioned from the beginning is that a lot of times this is your most popular things you're going to do. You've got your member setups, you've got plates, all those draw elements and draw loads are all right here at the top. So the first thing I typically do is I just start drawing a member. And in the past, when I start to draw that member, I say, oh, I forgot I didn't set up a section set. But in this case, as I showed you, you can go ahead and say, actually, you can do it right here. As you're modeling, you can start setting up that section set. So you can create a new section set or alter one that you have here. I'm editing the very first one, HR1. And I'm going to use some wood. I changed my mind. So I just come back up here and I say, I want wood as my section set. And I'm going to go ahead in here and edit this section set. And I'm going to change this to be a 2x4. So I can just say, let's make that a 2x4. And it's a beam and it's rectangular, and go from there and say, okay. And I've got all of that ready to start drawing. The other thing I always forget once I start drawing is that I maybe don't have set this properly up my drawing grid. The drawing grid helps us to draw along the way. So it's like a tracing paper. And I really like to have that drawing grid set up. But now what I can do is that drawing grid is set up live on the screen. So you can change its color, for example, just by going there. You can say, let's make it blue. Now all of a sudden it's blue in the background. That might be a little dark, but I can adjust it here. So I can make it a background of light blue. I can make the different elements on that, the X increments and the Y increments. So I'm going to change the X increments to be 20 at 2, and I have that ready. All of a sudden it's just live on the screen. You can change its location. You can do whatever you want. So I'm just going to draw a truss because I always think of trusses when I'm drawing. So I'm going to go ahead and draw in a truss over here and maybe a scissors truss. And I'm going to make my scissors truss look kind of like it has a little bit of a different bottom here. So the bearing is a little higher on the one side versus the other. And then I'm going to go ahead and just what I typically do is I start to draw in my webs. So I'll create another section set. I'm going to create that section set called, I'm going to edit this one. I'm going to create a new one. And this new one I'm going to call web. And I'm going to make that a 2x4. But these are going to call as V-braces for some reason. That might make more sense when I'm applying wind to it. So I've got webs in there as my section set, and I can start drawing. And to draw in a truss, you may also want to make sure that this truss is going to be most importantly for us is to draw in as a pin, not as a fix. So to do that, you have all your releases here. So when you're drawing in by default, it's fixed, but you can change that by just saying pinned, and that sets it up for us so that the I and the J release are now pinned. You could have also typed in there bend pin, which means bending pin, but otherwise you can just go into that. Whenever you see a ... it just means it can open a dialog for you. So RISA is really set up in a way that you can type in there or you can open up a dialog very often. Otherwise, you can see there. So I can just start drawing in different elements. So I can draw in my truss elements here. And sometimes I'm going to find that it's going to be helpful to grab different intersection points, but sometimes I'm not finding intersection points. So there's a lot of ways you can do things in this new version here. Like you can go ahead draw by increment, which is helpful. So an increment means that I can increment along the length of the member every foot. And that's what that increment distance is now, 1 foot. So from the left to the right, as I drew it, every 1 foot, and I can turn off that display grid if I want. I can say, okay, I can draw this every 1 foot from that side, from the start to the end. I'm drawing in 1 foot increments. So that's a helpful way to do it. Otherwise so let's go ahead and grab an increment. And you always had these quarter and third points. I'm going to turn those off just so you can see the increment. So that increment is shown right there. I can do that right there. I also can do something like a perpendicular, which is also very helpful when you're doing a truss like this. So I can go increments here and then perpendicular, and I'm drawing different webs along the distance just by using that increment or that perpendicular. So I can even say, I actually want perpendicular. There we go. So it's forcing it to be perpendicular. So that's a helpful way to do it. You can go ahead and draw in all of those pieces. You can say, I'm going to go ahead and the other way you can do, let's change that increment to a specific. Maybe you want to do, let's go to 1.5 on the other side. So I'm going to go ahead and do similar, but on this side, it's opening it up a little bit. And I have it a little bit larger, so I can go ahead and get that all in the place. I'm see wherever I have a hover point, I can get that there. There we go. And I'm going to keep this just one more bay. There we go. Okay. So we have all of our webs in place, and the next thing, and what I'm doing just when I'm drawing that, when I draw all those members, what I've got is it bumps over to those drawing tools. It's using I have also the universal snaps as well. So those increments are going along the XY direction. But what I want to do is I'm going to copy everything on this, and I'm going to copy it so that we copy it into the Z direction. So I can select everything. And I'm going to say now, once I've selected everything, I'm going to make a modification, which it jumped to. I'm going to copy it in the global direction. So copying this in the Z direction, I'm going to copy it back. Let's say we'll copy it forward in space. So it's actually, that's backward. So -10 feet. And by doing that, I'm also going to copy the bays. So I copy it so that it connects the bays. So every time I have a web, it's going to connect those. And I say apply to selected, and all of a sudden it is now copying it back there in space. That's kind of a helpful way to see how it makes almost like a roof truss right now. I've now connected that whole system. The other thing I can do is I'm going to draw in some columns underneath this. So I'm going to say let's draw. Again, we're going to draw in elements, and these elements here, I'm going to change this to be just assign a shape directly. And this one, I'm just going to say I want to use a 6x6, and I can just type 6x6 right in there. So I don't have to always define a section set, but I want to draw this vertically down, and I need to do that. How do I get this? Oops, I connected to the wrong spot. Well, I can clean up that later here, but I'm going to say just grab there and go down. And, where do we click to? I've always had that problem where I had to then define a node, and I'll have to think about things ahead of time. But what I like to do now is just global axis. Let's lock to the global axis, and let's just use an increment of, I know I want to go 10 feet. That's all. So when I go down here, I'm going to snap to a 10-foot increment, and it's got me right there. And that's all I have to do. So I can just do that all over the place. I can say, let's just go ahead and say that was a 10-foot increment. There it is. And I've got it. So I can do all that everywhere I want to go. So I go ahead and do that the same thing here. It remembers the last thing I did. Let's see if I grab that spot, and it's 10 foot down. And then I go ahead and say, let's do that over here. And I've got that. And so what that global axis, lock to axis is doing, it's just giving me like an orthogonal 3-dimensional draw. If I wanted to connect them, I could. That would also could work there. You can really just work in 3 dimensions at that point, which is really helpful. I made a mistake over there. I can go ahead and clean that up. You can just zoom in. And then you can go and say, let me zoom into this area right here. Just highlight that node. I always say clean up your model. You don't want to have junk floating around. So then I just push the delete button, and it gets rid of that node. And all of a sudden, I'm get better on that there. I can also I'm going to go ahead and select all of these because I, by accident, made all my columns pin, which is not what I was interested in. I want to make these fixed. So I can either open that dialog with the 3 dots, or I can just delete. And by deleting it, it just defaults it to a fully fixed condition. That's your default whenever you don't address anything in your fixities. It's just always fully fixed. And so then I can go ahead and say, let's unselect everything. I made a quick change to all those columns. Let's say you do want to use the delete tool. So I'm going to say the modify tool. If I go to modify, you either can delete a single thing by just clicking on delete and then just click on it. But you also have delete multi, and you can delete different things, just like you always had the ability to make different deletions. One of the cool things about the delete is that if I select something, you can actually unselect here. So I'm going to unselect everything in this. I'm just going to select just that one member, which we could have done as a single, but I want to show you how it works. Apply to selected, we'll delete that, and it also gives you a running tally of what was deleted. This was helpful for me always with model merge to know what happened. So I liked having this ability to see this in the delete tool too. We know what happened along the way, which is a really, really cool way to see that. You can always do things like add split nodes, add members, rotate. All the tools that you've always had here are all in the modify list. So a lot of the things that you've kind of gotten used to by using a modify dialog are really just in the ribbon right now. And they just work based on what you've selected. But you can make changes to those things right there. You can either adjust them in the property grid or you can adjust them right in the modify tool. So this kind of wraps up all of the different features in this program, giving you an ability to see how you would work with a big model, an existing model, showing you how you might work with a model that you want to do from scratch and how to build that model. There's a lot of different pieces in this version that enhance the features that we've had in the years past. RISA is a really, really great product, around for 30 years. And what we've tried to do is take all of the power of the 30 years and modernize it and give you so much more innovative tools inside of this new RISA-3D. If you have any questions about this webinar or about how the features work in RISA version 18, please contact us directly at info@risa.com.